Hey, it's Bon. Let's talk about the Xbox Showcase in 2023. I wasn't around this weekend. I had to catch up on all this stuff late. I am now here. You may see me sun kissed and beautiful from my time off. But let's talk about games, and specifically, let's get into the Xbox Showcase. I just don't have time to cover everything, to go through every single game. So what I did with all of the showcases over the last week is I picked my top 3 favorite games, which was really hard from the Xbox Showcase. I'm going to talk about them, and then maybe during the podcast, I'll go into a bit more depth. So let's get into it. So for number 3, with Xbox, it was Fable. Now, this was a cinematic, for the most part, obviously captured on Xbox Series X, I'm sure, trailer, but it did a good job of setting a tone. I think people have been worried about the Forza developer not being able to capture kind of the magic that Fable had, where it was kind of a mix of, kind of brutal storylines, but a lot of comedic, and intent and kind of feelings around it. And I thought this trailer did a really, really good job of kind of setting the tone for what this game will be. It looked like there were snippets of actual gameplay in it with, the main character using their powers and things like that. But it definitely seems like it was, a lot of cinematics and things like that. The little twist within the trailer of who's telling the story and who they end up being. I do suggest checking out the trailer if you haven't seen the whole thing. It's great, and it seems like it's setting a tone again that is perfect for Fable, and is a perfect way to bring Fable into 2024 or 5, whenever this game actually comes out, because I believe this was one they did not date. But I think it looks great. I am excited for this. I wasn't actually a big Fable person back during the OG days, but I like a lot different games now than I used to. So Fable looked really good. I'm really excited for it. My number 2 game was Senua's Saga. I really, really, really like Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. One of my favorite games of all time. Easily one of my favorite endings of a game of all time. There's a sequence at the end where the music and everything it's just perfect. And I'm really excited to see what they do with this game now, with a sequel, trying to expand on a relatively simple premise in the first one, but trying to make it more than that, and trying to kind of, expand the game and what I think will become, for lack of a better comparison, like Xbox's God of War. I really do believe that's going to be the point, or kind of the feel of this game, obviously with a very different characters and the way the story is told, and obviously Senua's struggles and things like that. And this trailer, I think, did a really, really good job of kind of setting the tone again, similar to what Fable did. I've seen some complaints about that they're not showing enough gameplay and stuff like that. Well, they did show gameplay last year, even though I know people didn't seem to believe it or feel like it was enough, and maybe it wasn't. I think even myself, I do want to see this game being played by someone with a controller, but there's time for that. This game, the graphics look incredible. I saw some really hilarious commentary with people saying things like, well, if Xbox is just never going to release a high fidelity game, then what are they even doing competing? And it's just like, you can't look at some of these games and not pretend like the fidelity isn't there, whether it's Forza or a game that's way out like Fable, or Senua's Saga, or even Starfield, which we'll talk about in a moment. But whatever, those people aren't there to be pleased, they're there to complain. But Senua's Saga, the way that they've already are introducing the voices and kind of the characters that are going to be within herself, as well as the type of people or entities she's going to be interacting with in the game world. I can't be more excited. I want them to take their time with this game, let it come out when it's ready. I would have loved for this game to have been coming out this year. I didn't really expect it, and I'm okay if it doesn't. Just make sure it's really, really good, and that will make most people happy, at least the ones who want to be happy. And finally, a game that I probably need to do a whole video on by itself with Starfield, my number one game of the Xbox show. Just, I mean, what do you say? Like, for me, this was the best presentation for a game ever. And you know, I've seen people who were doubting Starfield and stuff like that, and what I've been telling people for years at this point, more than likely, you don't doubt Bethesda. Bethesda has released badly performing games forever that are some of the best games ever made, and it's because there's a magic, there's something unique about the way they detail games and put stuff into them. And this game even will probably come out in decent shape, because I think that's a big part of why they delayed it. So it looks good. I think the graphics look great. The lighting system looks amazing. The worlds they showed off and the creatures and everything looks so good. The combat looks really good. This supposed help from id Software, who does like the Doom games and like Quake and stuff like that, seems like it worked, because the combat looked incredible. You know, the things they talked about with the ships and shipbuilding and capturing other ships, and you can do piracy, you can, you know, build, you know, little fortifications, and outposts, you can recruit your crew, you can romance, you can, you know, and what's so hilarious about it to me is that they've talked so much about this game. They've shown that it has so much to do, there's so much depth, and they basically haven't talked about the story at all. And I love that. And I've seen people speculating like, well, maybe the story is not very good, that's why they're not talking about it. I'm like, fool, it's going to be a great story. And there's going to be all kinds of endings, and there's going to be all kinds of ways you can approach it. It's just, there's so much about this game that looks like it's going to be good, is that the story is going to speak for itself. And it's going to be the type of game that you may not finish the story for 2 years, because you're going to be doing everything else that's available. This game is, I think, and I hope it's going to be a legit contender for Tears of the Kingdom for Game of the Year. And if it comes out and if it's half of what they've presented so far, I think it should be. I think that there's definitely some interesting biases when it comes to Tears of the Kingdom and stuff like that. So we'll have to see if you know, Starfield can actually overcome that. But regardless, it just looked so good. It is what we thought it was going to be and more, in my opinion. There was some late controversy where they've talked about how on the Series X and S, it's going to be locked at 30 FPS. It's going to be 4K on Series X. It's going to be 1440p, I believe, on Series S. They labeled it as an artistic decision. I kind of roll my eyes at that a little bit, because, you know, it's just, in modern games, like, they have to realize that if they can do a 60 FPS mode, that's going to be the preference, I think, for the majority of people who are aware of that situation. If a game can run at 4K 30 FPS, it can probably run at a variable resolution at 60. And that's what most performance modes are, is locked 60 with a variable resolution. So it can typically go from like 1080p to 1440. And then you do your 4K 30 FPS, fidelity mode, or whatever you want to call it. So if they allow mods in this the way they did with 4, even on console, I suspect this will be alleviated very quickly. I honestly even believe that in the next, in the 6 months to a year after Starfield comes out, they'll do a baked in performance mode that you will be able to play it at a higher level. I did see a developer actually from BioWare that I interacted with, where I said essentially this, and they said the one thing about that is that there may be so much stuff going on in these games because of the physics systems and all the stuff that's happening, that there may be a CPU limitation, that's why they're limiting the 30 FPS, and that just because it can do 4K 30 on the Series X doesn't necessarily mean it has the horsepower to do like 1080 60, but that we'll just have to wait and see. I suspect someone's going to work some magic and we'll get that better thing. I kind of also don't care. I think obviously this really good looking gunplay is maybe going to suffer a bit at 30 FPS, so you'll see people potentially playing on PC instead, which is fine if you have that ability. But I think that the 30 FPS is going to be such a minuscule issue with this game that it's basically just being pushed by people who I think are looking for a reason to complain, because this game is going to be, Skyrim in space. And I think while that was a long shot before, I don't think it is now. And that was my, top 3 of Xbox. The thing about the Xbox show is that I think basically everything they showed looked at least okay or interesting. And most of the stuff looked awesome. And so whether it's first party stuff or third party Game Pass Day 1 stuff or otherwise, I think this was one of the best showcases I've ever seen from any of the companies, especially Xbox. And I think they're setting themselves up really well for the future of the games that they have coming out. I think 2024 looks like it's going to be an especially impressive year. I think 2023 is going to go down with Hi-Fi Rush, Starfield, and Forza Motorsport, as well as a smattering of other games, will go down as a pretty good year, with Redfall being ignored pretty heavily there. And especially if you factor in Game Pass, they put out good games on there, and it's a lot of fun to have that. So, and it looks like it's only going to get more fun. So there it is. If you like this video, please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, comment down below with questions, your own thoughts, or even to just say hello. You can find me as Bond Diesel all over the internet, including over on Twitch, where I do stream here and there. You can also catch me on Twitter. You can get my weekly podcast, The Echo Cast, which is right here on YouTube and on all podcast platforms. That's all I have for this one. So until next time.